Welcome to our channel Think and Speak English. Everyone today is chasing the same invisible target: perfection. The perfect face, the perfect body, the perfect English, the perfect life. But let me ask you something honestly. Have you ever felt more confident the closer you tried to get to perfect, or more exhausted? Look around carefully. People are smiling, posting, talking, improving, but inside, many of them are tired. Tired of pretending, tired of trying to meet a standard that never feels enough. This is the trap no one talks about. The more you try to become perfect, the further you move away from who you really are. At first, it feels like motivation. You want to improve. You want to grow. That's normal. But slowly, something changes. Improvement turns into pressure. Pressure turns into fear. And fear turns into silence. You start thinking before every word you say. You hesitate before every action you take. Not because you don't know what to do, but because you are afraid it won't be good enough. So you adjust yourself. You hide your mistakes. You hide your weaknesses. You hide your real personality. And without realizing it, you are no longer living as yourself. You are performing a version of yourself that you think people will accept. This is where the real problem begins. Because when you stop being real, you lose something much more important than confidence. You lose connection with yourself. You don't trust your voice. You don't trust your thoughts. You don't trust your actions. Everything becomes filtered through one question. Is this perfect enough? And the answer is almost always no. But here is the truth most people avoid. Nobody is perfect. Not the people you admire. Not the people you compare yourself to. Not even the version of yourself you are trying to become. Perfection is not a destination. It is an illusion. And the longer you chase it, the longer you stay stuck. Today's story is not about success. It is not about becoming the best. It is about something more real. It is about a person who believed he had to be perfect before he could live, and how that belief almost destroyed him. Because somewhere in his story, you might recognize your own. His name was David. He was 24 years old, living alone in a small apartment in a crowded city where everything moved fast, except him. If you saw him outside, you wouldn't notice anything special. Just another quiet guy, walking carefully, speaking softly, trying not to stand out. But inside, David was fighting a battle no one could see. Every morning started the same way. The alarm rang. He opened his eyes, and before even getting out of bed, the thoughts began. Not positive ones, not hopeful ones, just quiet criticism. When he stood in front of the mirror, it wasn't really a reflection. It was a list of problems. His face didn't look right. His body wasn't strong enough. His English wasn't good enough. His confidence was almost invisible. He didn't see a person. He saw flaws. And the worst part? He believed all of it. Getting dressed was never simple. He would change his shirt again and again, not because he cared about style, but because he was afraid. Afraid that someone would notice something wrong. Afraid that someone would judge him. That same fear followed him everywhere. On the street, in the elevator, at work. Even when he laughed, it wasn't natural. It was controlled, measured, safe. David wasn't lazy. That's what made it more painful. He tried. He really did. He watched videos, practiced English alone, repeated sentences quietly in his room. In those moments, he felt like maybe, just maybe, he was improving. But the moment real life appeared, real people, real conversations, everything disappeared. His mind froze. His words vanished. His confidence collapsed. And slowly, without realizing it, David started doing exactly what we talked about before. He wasn't living anymore. He was performing. Every word, every action, every movement filtered through one question: is this good enough? And when the answer felt like no, he chose silence. So while the world around him kept moving, David stayed in the same place, waiting, waiting to be better, waiting to be ready, waiting to become someone who deserved to speak. But deep down, there was one feeling he could not escape. He was tired. Not tired from work, not tired from life, tired of being himself, and at the same time, tired of not knowing how to be anyone else. What made David's situation even more painful was not his lack of ability, but the belief he carried every single day. A belief so quiet, so normal, that he never questioned it. He told himself, "I will speak when my English is better. I will try when I feel more confident. I will act when I am ready." It sounded reasonable, safe even. But in reality, it was the very thing keeping him stuck. After all those mornings in front of the mirror, after all those moments of hesitation we saw before, this belief became his rule for living. And rules, when repeated long enough, become identity. David didn't just think he wasn't ready, he became someone who was always waiting. He studied, but he never spoke. He practiced, but only when he was alone. He prepared, but avoided every real opportunity, because in his mind, real life was not a place to learn, it was a place to prove himself. And if he wasn't perfect, he believed he would fail. That's why every situation felt heavy. A simple question from a colleague became pressure. A small conversation became a test. Even saying one sentence felt like standing on a stage where everyone was watching, judging, waiting for him to make a mistake. So instead of risking that feeling, he chose silence. Again and again. But silence has a cost. At first, it protects you. It keeps you safe from embarrassment. But slowly, it starts to take things away. Opportunities, growth, confidence, and eventually, even your voice. David began to notice something changing inside him. Not suddenly, but gradually. He was thinking more, but doing less. Hoping more, but trying less. Every day looked the same, and deep down, a quiet frustration started growing. He would sit alone at night, remembering small moments, times when he could have spoken, times when he almost tried. And each time the same thought came back. Why didn't I just do it? But instead of learning from it, he added another layer of pressure. Next time, I must be better. Next time, I must not make mistakes. So the cycle continued. The more he waited to be perfect, the further he moved away from action. And the further he moved away from action, the more impossible perfection became. It was a loop, with no exit. And without realizing it, David was not failing because he wasn't good enough. He was failing because he never allowed himself to begin. And then, one day, something happened that David could not ignore. It wasn't a big opportunity. It wasn't a life-changing event. It was something simple, so simple that most people would forget it in minutes. But for David, it became the moment that broke him. It was a normal day at work. The office was quiet, keyboards clicking, people focused on their screens. David was sitting at his desk, reviewing a report he had already studied many times before. He understood it. He knew the details. He had even practiced explaining it alone in his room. In that safe space, his words were clear. His voice was steady. For a moment, he felt capable. Then his manager walked over. "David, can you explain this part in English?" That was it, just one question. But in an instant, everything inside him collapsed. His heart started beating fast. His chest tightened. His mind, which had been clear just seconds ago, suddenly went blank. All the sentences he had practiced disappeared. Every word he knew felt out of reach. He stood up slowly. The room felt different now, quieter, heavier. He could feel people looking at him. Not judging, not laughing, just waiting. But in his mind, it felt like pressure, like expectation, like a spotlight he was not ready for. Say something. His mind whispered, but nothing came out. Seconds passed, then more. Each second felt longer than it really was. His throat was dry. His hands felt cold. He opened his mouth slightly, trying to force the words out, but they wouldn't move. It was like being trapped inside his own body. Finally, his manager gave a small nod and said, "It's okay. Sit down." That sentence was soft, polite, normal, but for David, it felt like something shattered inside. He sat back down slowly, staring at his screen, but he couldn't see anything anymore. The numbers, the words, the report, it all blurred together. All he could hear was his own voice in his head, repeating the same questions again and again. Why didn't I speak? What is wrong with me? Why am I like this? That moment stayed with him the entire day. And when he went home that night, it didn't disappear. It followed him into the silence of his room, growing heavier, louder, more painful. Because this time, it wasn't just another missed chance. This time, it felt like proof. That night, David didn't turn on the lights. He walked into his room, dropped his bag, and sat down in the dark. The silence felt heavier than usual, almost like it was pressing down on him. Normally, this was the moment he would escape. Open his phone, scroll endlessly, distract himself until the feeling faded. But not tonight. Tonight, the moment at the office wouldn't let him go. It kept replaying in his mind. The question, the silence, the way he stood there, unable to speak, again and again. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, staring into nothing. And slowly, the thoughts began to change. At first, they were questions. Why didn't I say anything? But then they became statements, heavy ones. I'm not confident. I'm not good enough. I will never change. That last sentence stayed longer than the others. It didn't feel emotional. It felt quiet, final. David sat there, breathing slowly, feeling something sink deeper inside him. It wasn't just sadness anymore. It was something more dangerous. Acceptance of failure. The kind of acceptance that makes you stop trying. But then, something unexpected happened. In the middle of all those thoughts, a small doubt appeared. Not about his ability, but about his belief. He replayed the moment again, but this time, differently. He remembered that he actually knew the answer. He had studied it. He had practiced it. So why didn't he speak? It wasn't because he didn't know. It was because he was waiting. Waiting to say it perfectly. Waiting for the right words. Waiting to feel confident enough. And in that waiting, he lost the moment. David slowly lifted his head. His eyes adjusted to the darkness, and for the first time that night, his thoughts became clearer. My problem is not my English. He whispered it, almost like he didn't fully believe it yet. My problem is, I think I need to be perfect before I speak. The room stayed silent, but something inside him shifted. All this time, he thought he was lacking skill, that he needed more practice, more knowledge, more preparation. But now he saw something else, something deeper. He wasn't stuck because he was bad. He was stuck because he was afraid to be imperfect. And that realization hurt, because it meant the real problem wasn't outside, it was inside him. And for the first time, David couldn't blame the situation anymore. He had to face himself. David slowly stood up. The room was still dark, but his eyes had adjusted. He walked toward the window, where a faint reflection of himself appeared on the glass. It wasn't clear like a mirror. It was dim, slightly distorted, almost unfamiliar. And yet, it felt more honest. He stared at it for a long time. For years, whenever he felt uncomfortable, he would escape. Noise, videos, distractions, anything to avoid facing what was inside him. But tonight was different. There was no phone in his hand, no music, no escape, just him. And that quiet reflection. At first, nothing came. Then slowly, the questions returned, but deeper this time. Why am I always afraid? Why do I care so much about what people think? Why do I feel so small? He didn't try to answer. He just stood there, letting the questions exist. And then, like something unlocking inside his memory, an image appeared. He was younger, maybe 12, standing in a classroom, a book in his hands. He was reading English out loud. His voice was slow, careful, and then he made a mistake, just a small one. A few students laughed. Not loudly, not cruelly, just enough. And he remembered what he did next. He smiled. He laughed with them, pretended it didn't matter. But now, standing in front of that reflection, he realized something he had never understood before. That moment didn't disappear. It stayed. That was the first time he felt embarrassed, the first time he felt not enough. And from that day, without knowing it, he changed. He became more careful, more quiet, more controlled, not because he wanted to improve, but because he didn't want to feel that pain again. David's breathing became slower. "It's not the mistake," he whispered softly. "It's the feeling." That was it. He wasn't afraid of speaking. He wasn't afraid of failing. He was afraid of that exact feeling, the moment when people look at you and you feel exposed, small, judged. And to avoid that feeling, he built a rule. Don't try unless you are perfect. It sounded safe, logical, protective. But now, standing there, he saw the truth clearly. That rule didn't protect him. It trapped him. Because if perfection is required to begin, then he would never begin. David stepped a little closer to the glass. His reflection didn't change. Still imperfect. Still unclear. Still human. And for the first time, he didn't look away. He just stood there and faced it. David didn't move for a while. He was still standing in front of the window, looking at his own reflection, the same unclear, imperfect image. Nothing about it had changed, but something inside him had. For the first time, he wasn't trying to fix what he saw. He wasn't criticizing. He wasn't comparing. He was just there. And in that quiet moment, a simple thought appeared. Not loud, not powerful, not motivational, just honest. Then what should I do? He didn't have a big answer. No sudden confidence. No clear plan. Just a feeling that something had to change, but not everything at once. David closed his eyes for a second, then opened them again. His reflection was still there. Still imperfect. Still real. And then, slowly, he spoke. "Tomorrow, I will try once." The words felt small, almost insignificant, But they were different from anything he had said before. Not, "I will become confident." Not, "I will speak perfectly." Not, "I will change my life." Just, "I will try once." He repeated it quietly as if testing it. Just once. For years, David had been making big promises in his head. I will improve. I will not fail again. I will become better. But those promises always came with pressure, and pressure always led to fear, and fear always led to silence. This time, there was no pressure. Trying once didn't require perfection. Trying once didn't require confidence. Trying once didn't even require success. It only required action. And somehow, that made it possible. David took a slow breath. His chest still felt heavy, but not as tight as before. The fear was still there, but it was quieter now. Not gone, just less controlling. He realized something important. Maybe change doesn't start with big decisions. Maybe it starts with small ones that you actually keep. He stepped back from the window and sat down on his bed. The room was still dark. His problems were still there. Tomorrow would not suddenly become easy, but tonight, something had shifted. For the first time, he was not waiting to become someone else. He was willing to act as he was. Before lying down, he whispered one more time, almost like a promise. Not a strong one, but a real one. Tomorrow, just once. And for the first time in a long time, that felt enough. The next morning didn't feel special. There was no sudden motivation, no burst of confidence, no feeling of becoming a new person. David opened his eyes, stared at the ceiling for a few seconds, and then remembered. Today, just once. The words came back, but they didn't feel strong anymore. They felt fragile, almost like they could disappear if he thought too much. And immediately his mind started pushing back. What if you fail again? What if it's embarrassing? What if nothing changes? He sat up slowly, feeling that familiar weight in his chest. The fear was still there. Nothing had magically gone away. But this time he didn't argue with it. He didn't try to feel confident. He just remembered what he promised. Try once. David stood in front of the mirror. For a brief second, the old habit returned. You still look the same. You haven't improved. But instead of following those thoughts, he interrupted them, quietly. It's okay. Not perfect, not better, just okay. That was new. He got dressed faster than usual. He still hesitated for a moment, still thought about changing his shirt, but he stopped himself. Not because he was confident, but because he didn't want to go back to the same loop. When he stepped outside, the world looked exactly the same. People walking, cars moving, noise everywhere. But inside him, everything felt heavier. Because today he had to act. At the office, he sat down at his desk, trying to focus, but his mind kept scanning every moment, waiting. Waiting for the opportunity, waiting for the test. And then it came. A colleague walked over and asked, "Hey David, can you explain this part?" A simple question. But instantly, his body reacted. His heart started beating faster, his throat became dry, his hands felt cold. The same feeling, the same fear. Nothing had changed. For a few seconds, he said nothing. His mind screamed at him. Don't do it. You will mess up. Stay silent. This was the moment. The same pattern. The same choice. Avoid. Or try. David took a slow breath. His voice from last night came back, not loud, not strong, but clear enough. Just once. He swallowed, opened his mouth, and spoke. I think this part shows the data from last month. His voice was not steady. His grammar wasn't perfect. He paused, searched for words, felt the fear in every second. But he didn't stop. And when he finished, something unexpected happened. His colleague nodded. Yeah, that makes sense. That was it. No judgment, no embarrassment, no disaster, just normal. David sat there quietly. But inside, something shifted. Not confidence, something deeper, relief. That small moment stayed with David for the rest of the day. It wasn't dramatic. No one clapped. No one praised him. It didn't feel like a big success from the outside. But inside him, something had quietly changed. For the first time, his fear didn't win. He sat at his desk, staring at the screen, but his thoughts were different now. Not loud, not negative, just curious. So, that's it? He replayed the moment again, just like he did the night before, but this time the ending was different. He spoke. He didn't freeze. He didn't escape. And nothing bad happened. That realization didn't make him suddenly confident. It didn't remove his fear. But it created a small crack in the belief that had controlled him for years. Maybe it's not as dangerous as I thought. The rest of the day, David didn't transform into a new person. He still hesitated. He still overthought. His heart still reacted in the same way when someone talked to him. But now, there was something else inside him. A choice. Later, when another small opportunity appeared, a simple discussion between colleagues, he felt the same fear rise again, the same tight chest, the same voice in his head. Stay quiet. But this time, that wasn't the only voice, there was another one. Try again. It was weaker, softer, but it was there. David paused for a second. Just like before, he didn't feel ready. He didn't feel confident. But he remembered what had happened earlier. So he spoke again. Short sentence. Simple words. Not perfect, but real. And again. Nothing bad happened. No judgment. No rejection. Just conversation. Something inside him began to shift. Not suddenly, but steadily. Like a small engine starting after being silent for too long. That evening, as he walked home, he didn't feel excited. He didn't feel proud. He felt lighter. Because for the first time, he wasn't trapped in the same loop. Think to fear, to avoid, to regret. Now there was a new pattern forming. Feel fear to act anyway, to survive, to learn. It was small, almost invisible, but powerful. When he reached home, he stood in front of the mirror again. The same reflection, the same imperfections. But this time, he didn't immediately search for what was wrong. Instead, he remembered what he did. Not how he looked, not how he sounded, but the fact that he tried. And quietly, almost without thinking, he said something new. Maybe I can do this. Step by step. For a few days, things felt manageable. David continued doing what he had started. Small sentences, small attempts. Nothing impressive, nothing perfect, but consistent. And slowly that quiet rhythm gave him a fragile sense of progress. Not confidence, not yet. But something close enough to feel different. Maybe I'm changing. That thought appeared gently, almost carefully, as if it didn't want to break anything. But life has a way of testing you the moment you start to believe that. One afternoon, just as David was getting used to these small wins, his manager walked over again. The same calm voice, the same normal tone. "David, we have a client meeting this afternoon. I want you to present the report." The words hit harder than anything before. This wasn't a small moment. This wasn't a quick explanation to one colleague. This was different. More people, more attention, more pressure, more risk. Immediately, his body reacted. His chest tightened. His heartbeat became louder. His hands felt cold again. The same fear, but stronger this time. Like everything he had been avoiding had suddenly returned, multiplied. His mind didn't hesitate. "This is too much. You're not ready. You will embarrass yourself." The old voice was back. Clear, aggressive, familiar. David sat there, frozen, staring at his screen. The words in front of him meant nothing. His thoughts were already somewhere else, inside that meeting room, imagining every possible failure. For a moment, the small progress he made felt like it disappeared. Maybe it was just luck. Maybe I can't do this again. That doubt crept in quietly, but it spread fast. He stood up and walked to the washroom, closing the door behind him. He looked into the mirror there. A clean reflection, sharp, unforgiving. And suddenly, the old version of himself stood right in front of him again. The one who overthinks. The one who avoids. The one who waits. "You can still say no." The thought felt safe. He could avoid this. Make an excuse. Delay it. Protect himself from failure. For a few seconds, he almost decided. Almost. But something stopped him. Not confidence, not courage, just a memory. That small moment. That simple sentence. That quiet relief. And a new question appeared, cutting through the noise. If I run now, what happens next? He already knew the answer. Nothing changes. David looked at himself again. His fear was still there. Strong, real, undeniable. But now, so was his choice. David stood there, staring at his reflection in the mirror, his hands resting on the edge of the sink. The noise in his head was still loud. Fear was still there, pressing against him, trying to pull him back into safety. "You don't have to do this. You can avoid it. You can stay comfortable." The voice felt convincing, logical, familiar, and for a moment, it almost won. He imagined walking back to his manager, saying something simple. "I'm not ready. Or maybe someone else can do it." It would be easy. No embarrassment, no risk, no pressure, just relief. But then, another feeling appeared. Not fear, not confidence. Something heavier. The memory of all those nights. Sitting alone, overthinking, regretting, asking himself the same questions again and again. Why didn't I try? Why am I still the same? That pain felt deeper than fear. David closed his eyes for a second, breathing slowly. And suddenly, everything became clear. Not easier, but clearer. Running away would not protect him. It would trap him. Because every time he avoided something, he wasn't solving the problem. He was making it stronger. Teaching himself again and again that fear was in control. And if he chose that path now, nothing would change. Not tomorrow, not next week, not ever. He opened his eyes and looked at himself again. No difference. Still imperfect, still scared, but now he wasn't asking, "Am I ready?" He was asking something else. "What happens if I don't do this?" and the answer was simple. I stay the same. That was the moment everything shifted. Not dramatically, not emotionally, but deeply. David tightened his grip on the sink, then slowly let go. His hands were still cold. His heart was still beating fast. Fear was still there. But this time, it didn't decide for him. He spoke quietly, almost like a statement, not a motivation. I will do it. He paused. Even if I fail. Those words didn't make him feel stronger. They didn't remove the fear. But they gave him something more important. Direction. For the first time, David wasn't waiting to feel ready. He was choosing to act without being ready. And that choice was uncomfortable, painful even. But it was real. He took one last look at himself, then turned away from the mirror. The fear followed him. But this time, he didn't run. The meeting room felt colder than usual. David walked in slowly, aware of every step, every sound, every movement around him. People were already seated, talking quietly, waiting. The screen was on. The report was ready. Everything looked normal. Except him. He sat down, placing his hands on the table, trying to keep them still. But he could feel it. The slight tremble, the tension in his fingers. His heart was beating fast again, just like before, maybe even faster. Nothing had changed. The fear was still there. The difference was what he was going to do with it. His manager looked at him and said calmly, "David, you can start." That moment felt heavy. For a second, everything slowed down. The room, the voices, the air, it all faded into the background. And just like before, his mind went blank. The same silence, the same pressure, the same chance to freeze. This was the exact point where he failed last time. And for a brief second, the old instinct came back. Wait, think, don't speak yet. But then, something shifted. Not outside, inside. He remembered what he had decided. Not to be perfect, not to be confident, just to do it. David took a slow breath. His chest rose and fell, steady but heavy. He didn't wait for the right feeling. He didn't wait for the perfect sentence. He just started. This report shows the performance of the last quarter. His voice was quiet. Not strong, not impressive. But it was there. And that was enough. He continued. Slowly, carefully, sometimes pausing, sometimes searching for words. A few mistakes slipped out. His grammar wasn't perfect, his sentences weren't smooth, but he didn't stop. That was the difference. Before, one mistake would have ended everything. Now it was just part of the process. He kept going, and something unexpected happened. No one interrupted him. No one reacted negatively. People were listening. Some nodded slightly. Some followed along with the slides. The room didn't feel like a threat anymore. It felt normal. And as the seconds passed, his voice became a little more stable, not confident, but less fragile. When he finally finished, there was a short silence. Then someone said simply, "That was clear." Just 3 words. But they landed deeply. David stood there for a moment, not moving, not reacting. Inside him, something was happening, quiet but powerful. He didn't feel proud. He didn't feel excited. He felt something else. He did it. Not perfectly, not comfortably, but honestly, and for the first time, that felt enough. That moment didn't end in the meeting room. It followed David all the way home. Not loudly, not like excitement or pride. It stayed with him quietly, like something settling deep inside his chest. As he walked through the busy streets, surrounded by noise and movement, his mind was unusually calm. He replayed what had just happened. Not the mistakes, not the pauses, not the moments where his voice shook, but the fact that he didn't stop. For years, David believed that confidence was something you needed before you acted. That one day, somehow, he would wake up feeling ready, ready to speak, ready to try, ready to face the world without fear. But today proved something completely different. He acted while being afraid, and nothing broke. That realization didn't come like a sudden explosion. It came slowly, almost gently, like a truth he had always avoided but could no longer deny. Confidence doesn't come first. It comes after you speak with a shaking voice, after you make mistakes in front of others, after you survive moments you thought would destroy you. David had been waiting for confidence like it was a door he needed to open before entering life. But now he saw it clearly. Confidence is not the door. It's what you build after you walk through it. He stopped for a moment at a street corner, watching people pass by. Everyone looked normal. No one looked perfect. No one looked like they had everything figured out. And yet, they were all moving. That used to confuse him. Now it made sense. They weren't confident because they were perfect. They were confident because they kept going. David continued walking, slower this time. His body still remembered the fear from earlier. His hands were still slightly tense, but inside something had shifted permanently. The fear was still there, but it wasn't in control anymore. For the first time, he understood something deeper than motivation, deeper than advice. Action creates evidence, and evidence changes belief. Today, he created new evidence. I can speak even when I'm scared. I can continue even when I make mistakes. I can survive the moment I feared the most. Those thoughts didn't feel like motivation. They felt real. When he finally reached home, he stood in front of the mirror again. The same reflection. The same face. Nothing had changed on the outside. But this time, he didn't look for flaws. He looked for proof. And he found it. He didn't see a perfect person. He saw someone who tried. Someone who didn't run. Someone who stayed. David took a slow breath and spoke softly, not to motivate himself, not to convince himself, but to acknowledge something true. I'm still not perfect, he paused, then continued, more certain this time. But I'm not afraid of trying anymore. That sentence didn't change his life instantly, but it changed the direction of it, and that was enough.